studies for so many years. Well, I'm going to start out here a little bit. My friend would call this mixed up like a dog's breakfast. We're going to have a little film, few slides, game changers in ecosystem services, and then a little motivational ending. So first I'm going to start out with a bit of a film here. And let me just, oopsie, sorry about that. You'd go ahead and take a deep breath. You can help yourself to all you like of a ecosystem service. Good. Oh yeah, recent items. Thanks, Jen. So we'll start out with a little bit of a film that we began with, if it'll start up here. There it goes. Oops. Okay.
The economy. It was issue number 1 in the last election, sending Barack Obama to the conversation. Bailouts, food prices, foreclosures, credit squeeze. We're all in it together. Hi, I'm Dave Batker. I'm just an ordinary American, like, Joe the plumber. But I'm also an economist. I've worked for the World Bank. Okay, I've also worked for Greenpeace. And I want to talk to you about this economy everybody's talking about. What's it for anyway? And is it working? Can it work better? You've probably heard about how some people measure economic success. Wall Street checks its stocks. Are they up or down? The government checks inflation, unemployment, housing starts, consumer confidence. But the king of all economic measures is the GDP. That's shorthand for the gross domestic product. The grosser it gets, the better we assume the economy to be. But what is the GDP anyway?
The GDP is the total market value of all final goods and services produced in a country in a given year.
GDP measures what we made here this year and paid for. If we pay, then GDP goes up, unless we're paying for stuff made somewhere else. We buy a lot of that, but it doesn't count, at least not for us. There are other things that don't count either, like volunteering in my community. It's a waste of time as far as the GDP is concerned. So is that daily walk I try to take, and the time I spend with my son. Unless I buy him stuff, that counts. But remember that big oil spill in Alaska? Made you want to cry, didn't it? But the GDP was laughing all the way to the bank. Because first, there was money spent to clean it up. Then those huge legal bills. The spill added more to the GDP than if the oil had made it safely to the refinery. Seriously. Maybe Bobby Kennedy said it best.
It measures everything in short, except that which makes life worthwhile. And it can tell us everything about America, except why we are proud that we are Americans.
Once upon a time, our country had no idea how much stuff we made, and nobody cared. Until the Great Depression, when our government adopted national economic goals and needed a way of measuring their achievement. The economist Simon Kuznets laid out the GDP in 1934. During World War II, it was an important tool in measuring how many guns, tanks, and bombs we were building. Even then, Kuznets warned against making too much of his measure. But Kuznets is history, not the GDP though. With all the attention it gets, you'd think boosting the GDP is what the economy is for. That's what a lot of economists will tell you too.
The economy's purpose is to produce more and more goods and services that...
Doesn't matter what they are. If money is spent on them, they must be goods, and the more of them, the better. What the consumer wants, the consumer gets. Economists call that consumer sovereignty. Buyer knows best. Case closed. Or is it? Actually, there's an American tradition that's older than the GDP. About 100 years ago, Gifford Pinchot became the first director of the U.S. Forest Service. He wasn't a wild-eyed radical. He was a Republican. Pinchot believed that the purpose of the economy was the greatest good for the greatest number over the longest run. Think about it. Take the greatest good. What do you think that means?
The good life to me is having a job that's in your field that you're passionate about.
To me, family is very important.
And always having someone there to help you through hard times.
Having good health, nothing burning down financially, having everything stable.
It's all about quality of life, isn't it? Pursuit of happiness. Money's part of that. Stuff is part of that. But only part. Family, friends, health matter more. So how are we doing?
Well, I'm going to hold off now. Oops, close it up. If you'd like to see the exciting conclusion of what's the economy for anyway, you can check our website, or we've got a few copies on sale for 20 euros. But we nonprofits have to make our livelihood somehow. But, you know, I wanted to mention, there's a new sort of economic vision going on, if you haven't noticed. And it's global. And it goes kind of like this. What you need to do is work a lot harder for a lot less pay, scratch those benefits, and cut your vacation. Otherwise, be unemployed. Publish or perish. You need to, be more competitive with people earning $1 a day. We need to glug down a few more caffeinated, alcoholic, sugary drinks, and you can save a little time by dumping down a few antidepressants with it. And go ahead, and if you're sick, get to work. Stuff the kids and the old folks into the 24/7 daycare and forget them. Get your neck deep in debt so you can help save the economy with paying for education, all your stuff in your house. And please, substitute TV and trash the planet and your body consumption because you don't have enough time for your family and friends because you got to maintain that giant mountain of stuff. This is sort of the measurement. Well, there are a couple others. You can forget your retirement and, focus on helping corporations earn ever larger profits while just hoping that Wall Street doesn't nuke the economy again. So, hey, whoever said the economy is here to make you happy anyway? Well, this is one vision. This is the competition we've got, for our vision of a more sustainable, more leisurely, less consumptive, more biodiverse, happier economy. It's kind of tough competition, wouldn't you think? Well, let's kind of check out how it's going. How's it being adopted lately? Well, as a matter of fact, this was, January in Tunisia, January in Egypt. We've got South Africa protests. This was Wisconsin, and my folks are from Wisconsin. People there are just happy with cheese and football games, and here they were turning out by the tens of thousands, occupying the Capitol over in Wisconsin. Pretty incredible. Spain, incredible marches, etc. Malaysia, they finally repealed the Security Act, which folks have been trying to get rid of since the 1960s, since independence. Israel, huge protests. Japan, into nuclear power, the protest was about. Argentina, and of course the current Wall Street protests going on right now. Ireland, Greece, the U.S. again on Wall Street, and I think I skipped Iceland there. But I think the lesson is that that vision of prepare yourself, tighten your belt, tough love economics isn't going over too well right now. And it's somewhat of an opportunity for us. It's not just a few hippies and cranky economists that are out in the streets getting a bit upset. Now, I want you to step back for just a second and think about, I'll go to just this, our last slide there. But just think about for a second where we live today and the time period that we live in. Never before has humanity had so many people on the planet. Never before have we had so much technology, so much energy, so much knowledge about how our systems work, so much wealth, financial wealth, even though we've lost a few $1 trillion recently. So we're at somewhat of an apex. And yet we're stuck with a paradox. The very system that has given us a lot of wealth, these buildings, our transportation, clothes, everything else, sort of unimaginable wealth, is undermining the very systems that support it. Our climate, our soils, our water, our biodiversity. We're toxifying the whole biosphere. And so we are stuck with this sustainability paradox that on one hand, our economic system, which has brought great benefits, is collapsing our natural systems upon which it fully depends. As we all know, every bit of built capital came out of our natural capital. There is no difference from it. So I want you to think about our role in this transition from an economy which is fully unsustainable to an economy in the 21st century which may be sustainable. And we'll just give a little bit of history in the process here. First of all, think about this. In 1930, we had no measure for macroeconomics. We had no measure of GDP. It didn't exist. We didn't count how many unemployed people were. There was no measure of inflation, no measure of money supply, no 40 other macroeconomic measures. They didn't exist. We didn't even have macroeconomics. But the catastrophe of the Depression brought about a revolution in economics. We sort of pushed aside microeconomics into its place. The microeconomics is about firms, businesses, markets, and such. Macroeconomics is policy at the scale of the nation. And if you could sum up, just one more advertisement here, and we're producing this book, What's the Economy For Anyway? In fact, just yesterday, one of our folks, Yvonne, called up the publisher, this comes out on November 8th, and said, if you have any more of those galley copies with typos, take them down to Wall Street and put them in the library for those protesters. And the publisher did. They took a little box of these down there for them. But the first quote is from my son, Raphael, when he was 3, and I think it sums up much of the goal of macroeconomics, and it is, I want too much. That's basically, and if you look at the GDP and our economic goals, that's it. We need a forever growing economy, physically growing economy, otherwise we must be messed up. And this is simply a set of goals that we need to move aside. And that's why I'm so impressed by the goals that were in fact just mentioned. If you think about it, macroeconomics brought to us new goals, like producing more stuff. That wasn't a goal of the economy before. Reducing unemployment was another goal. Having a social system for the elderly, Social Security, etc. So we got new goals, then we got new measures out of it. GDP, unemployment, inflation, money supply, etc. And then we got new policies. Everything from Social Security all the way down. And then we got new institutions, agriculture, industrial policy, and a whole set of institutions which are really our framework of institutions that we still have today. And then we had funding mechanisms, everything from including the income tax. These funding mechanisms were the mechanisms to build a new economy in the 20th century. And it was successful. And if you think about it, transformation of economies is not quite as hard as we make it out to be. Just think about the U.S. economy. 1934 to 1944, it was completely transformed. Every sector, agriculture, industry, you name it. Think about, I think one of the most incredible parts of history that is overlooked, really, is the post-war period in Europe, where economies were completely rebuilt. And you think about 1944 to 1954, amazing. And the set of policies, progressive policies put in place for income tax, taxation on a whole variety of issues, and social programs and education, etc. That was a tremendous period. China, 1980 to 1990. In 1980, China was 1/10 the size of the Soviet Union. By 1990, it was 10 times the size. So economies are built to be transformed. That's all they do. Economies transform. They fall apart, like the Soviet Union. Tremendous depression. So we can go both. You can go kind of both ways. We see that all over the place. So I want to then think about, these new set of goals that, in fact, Bob mentioned from ecological economics and that are here. A sustainable economy, a fair economy, happiness. We find that, in fact, we did 50, to do this crazy film, we did 50 focus groups. And we found, words like degrowth, and it doesn't work too well with a normal person out there, but, but saying, you're going to be happier, or won't you be happier if you have more time with your kids and you have a little leisure time and you consume less and less debt, etc. And people are generally like, I would be happier with less debt, with more time with my family, etc. And so talking about happiness, good governance, of course, fairness, that's kind of language that we can think about. Now, and people are changing. I have one friend, these friends are retired military, kind of well off, had this big house, and I went in there to visit them one day, and they said, oh, we're moving out of here. And I said, oh, how come you're moving out? Oh, and Marlene pointed to this room and said, we sat in that room one day last year, and I cleaned it 12 times. So we're going to a small house. We've had it. And so I think there is, just as the Arab Spring and all those photos show, there's great discontent, not only with kind of banks and economic policy, but quality of life there's a great deal of discontent with. And so when we think about what we're doing, there are new goals. We are setting forth new goals, sustainability, fairness, etc. And new measures, and I love that discussion here. In fact, the new measures that we're talking about with ecosystem services grapple with, I think, the central problem of building a new economy. And that central problem is this. We have a group of problems on one side of the sustainability paradox, which are physical problems. The climate's messed up. We've got too many toxics, water balance, you name it. You go right down the list, biodiversity. These are